We are super proud to announce that Stay Plugged In is now sponsored by HyperX for our online events for the month of August. Prizes will include a Cloud Stinger wireless headset and a Cloud Stinger wired headset for our Turbo Tuesday tournaments for the first and second winning teams. And then for our Valorant tournaments, which are every other week on Thursdays and Fridays, that will be the Alloy Origins Core Mechanical Gaming Keyboard, HX Red, and the Pulsefire FPS Pro Gaming Mouse, which the keyboard is for first place and the mouse is for second place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Spincast. Today, we are diving into a multitude of different topics surrounding some esports organizations. Today, we're joined by, you know what, hold on, I just talked over myself. I'm gonna restart that. Yeah, that was terrible. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Spincast. Today, we're diving into a number of different topics, ranging from esports ownership of several orgs and also the very interesting topic of an agency surrounding representing esports pros and content creators from a business affairs standpoint. It's really interesting stuff here today. We're joined by Chris, aka TyTangles. So without further ado, Chris, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us where your passions in esports started and how those evolved and took you to where you are today.
Yeah, so howdy, y'all. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. Really, it's pretty interesting, actually. So, I went to college for business. The second I exited college, I got into business for myself. So I started my own company, which, of course, kind of negated the fact that I spent 5 years in college. Doing business and growing a business and stuff like that, there are similarities across the board no matter what industry you're in, right? Everybody pays taxes, everybody signs contracts, whether it be for jobs or relationships, temporary or permanent, etc. And so that was my life. And of course, I've always enjoyed video games, right? I don't want to date myself, but I'm a little bit older than perhaps your average guest. And so because of that, I go all the way back to probably Doom might be the first game that I played back for DAWs, MS-DAWs. Always been a fan of video games. And I like to play competitive. I was certainly never good enough to play at the top level, but I love to play competitive. And, when Rainbow Six came out, it kind of changed a lot for me. And I focused really heavily on spending what little time that I had to get better and get a little bit of team chemistry together with the squad. And we did some cool things. And that kind of segued into us as a team, as players, believe it or not, qualifying for the first season of CCS, right? Yeah. And so I actually played the first season of CCS as a player alongside, I didn't have any notable teammates other than perhaps Gotcha, who later went on to be a coach and player for TSM and Evil Geniuses. But that kind of, I like this thing, but people aren't really running this necessarily the way that, from a business perspective. There are other tournament organizers out there, big ones, but the community sense kind of resonated with me. And I was like, I think I can add some stuff to this. And I know Fluffy, who at the time had started CCS along with Rob Walker, who was on this show, I believe, previously. Yep. He was trying to offload. He didn't want to be involved anymore for one reason or another. And so I met with him. I managed to acquire it. I managed to retain Rob as part of it. And that was kind of my first segue into esports, period. Right? Of course, I watched, back in the day, the Green Wall, the Call of Duty team that everybody watched with Nadeshot and Scump and all them. I was an avid fan of watching that. But seeing this from the other side of the glass, as the TO, as the tournament organizer, gave me my first glimpse into the business side of esports, right? And I got to make contacts and stuff like this. And then skip forward about a year and a half, and I was having friends who I'd known through CCS were qualifying for Pro League and stuff like that. And everybody was asking me, can you look at the contract? Because, I don't publicize it, but it's also not a secret that I'm an entrepreneur and I deal with very large contracts day in and day out. And so I began looking them over. Oh, this won't work. Obviously we have a lawyer on staff. And so I would throw the occasional contract to him for, clarification, or, hey, listen, this term is not written the way that we need it to be written. And so eventually it got popular enough to where I was like, okay, listen, I need to at least be able to cover my expenses doing this. which is why at the end we founded OEA. That was about 2 years ago. And our main goal, our main focus is to work with people. And again, the average esports athlete slash content creator, I'd say 90+% of them are under the age of 25. It's very rare for them to have anything above a high school education. And more importantly than anything else is they haven't had the experience of negotiating a contract before. I mean, a lot haven't even been employed before, much less where they have to sign, an independent contractor agreement or something like that. And so our main focus is to make sure that we hold their hand and we guide them through with our professional expertise. Between me and the other people at OEA, we have over 30 years of esports business experience. And it's important to us that the client at the end of the day has a good deal, right? We see in the news all the time, people getting taken advantage of, TFU, right? Most notably recently. And which I found out the other day that the lawsuit actually got thrown out of court. That was interesting. But the bottom line is these kids, a lot of them don't know much. Esports right now is a pretty fickle business if you're not at the very top, and because of that, it incentivizes orgs to take as much as they can get from this relationship. And so we're there to tell them, we don't want to take advantage of the orgs either. We want them to make money, because if they make money, right, they can continue to compensate clients of mine. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure it's just a fair arrangement. So I hope that gave you enough of a description to kind of get the gist of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love to see it. And I know, like we were talking before we started recording, it's so important to really provide this agency, right? This representation that pros and content creators desperately need. Because like you said, a lot of them are younger than 25. They're they don't have a collegiate education. They probably almost always have zero business knowledge, right? So it's so important. Love to see that. Kind of just expanding on that thought. My next question is just talk a little bit more about the importance of allowing or what you can accomplish with having this representation, right? What it allows the players to do better and how that can directly relate to their long-term success, and the importance of this developing to like a more mainstream accepted way, so the orgs can't just rampantly exploit players and content creators.
Right. So, I mean, there's nothing as a content creator or a player, there's nothing that's going to beat educating yourself a little bit about the business. And I answer questions all the time, and my DMs are open on Twitter. I allow people to, hey, I have this one clause in my contract. What does this mean? And I'm not an attorney myself, so I can't give legal advice. We do keep an attorney on staff for, contractual language and stuff like that. But finding a lawyer, it is very important, especially if you're talking about years of your life being tied to this contract, and having an agent or really some sort of guidance if you don't fully understand what you're getting yourself into, because these contracts, they're legal documents. They're not designed to be easy reads, and it's not because they're trying to deceive anybody, but that's just because of how legal language is. So understanding, a lot of people, they pay attention. Okay, how much am I going to get paid? How long's the contract, right? And maybe how much does it cost to buy me out? But there's so much more in a contract that needs to be paid attention to and worked on for a player, like right of first refusal. How long does that last? How often are you going to get paid? What happens if you don't get paid the right amount? Is there a penalty for the organization? I've seen all sorts of crazy things you probably couldn't imagine. Large lumps and fees for the organization for a multitude of things, like sponsorships, etc. I just saw, I promise you, less than a week ago, a contract that mentioned anytime the organization would send that player gear is all it said. There was so it could have been a stick of gum for the way that it was written. 30 days get added to the length of the contract. People, I've been seeing this trend of people signing contracts for no pay, which is a huge mistake, right? You can make a verbal agreement to say, listen, we'll put your logo on our shirt, but if you're not paying us anything, we're not going to tie ourselves to you in any way where we can't get out. So, there's a lot of these things that aren't considered. And when you qualify for the big show, right? The pro league, the championship, the major, the energy level, the hype level is so high that the second any organization with any notoriety comes calling, the emotions get involved, and they tend not to look deeper into the agreement. And when you're doing this sort of work, you can't do it based off of emotion. It's just business at the end of the day. And so that one level of separation will, if you go to seek a professional of any kind, will already do you a lot of good when you're staring at your first contract opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some great number of great tidbits of advice there, and just kind of showing the importance of that legal side, right? It's very hard to educate yourself legally, but finding that help, seeking
Correct.
that advice goes such a long way to, allow yourself to not be tied down for 2, 3, 5 years with no way out. And then all of a sudden you don't like your passion and you want to do something else and you can't because, legally, if you don't, consequences do happen, unfortunately. Kind of on that same topic, if you can, as I know there's probably some privacy issues here, but if you can talk about like one experience in particular that like really highlights like, a player that might have been exploited by an org or a content creator that like you kind of helped through that process and what that process looks like, just to give our viewers and audience the feel of what it looks like and what is entailed in these probably lengthy processes sometimes, especially when there's any contractual disputes. Kind of what
Right.
that looks like, what it feels, and what that allowed that player to go do after that kind of led them to a better outcome.
So I do have an example, and there are a lot of details that I have to leave out. As a matter of fact, I might leave out who they are exactly.
That's fine.
And who both of the orgs were. But there was a team of mine in Rainbow Six Challenger League. I won't mention the region because I do have teams in every region across the globe. And they were in a contract in Challenger League for no pay. And it was pre-orchestrated if they made Pro League, how much it would get paid, which would have made them the by far lowest paid team in the history of Pro League in the region that they were in. And there was nothing good about the contract whatsoever for the players. It was every advantage was allotted to the organization. Thankfully, and this was a quote from our attorney as we worked on the case. He goes, "Thankfully, we live in a country where slavery has been made illegal," because that's what this contract was. And the thing about it is, when you sign a contract because emotions are high, just qualified for Challenger League, just qualified for whatever, you sign that contract. And actually, in this case, one of the players had a family friend who was an attorney look at the contract. And the thing about it is the attorney, I think he worked in contract law specifically, but has no idea about anything, having to do with esports. So when you look at an esports contract, from his perspective, the contract was legally sound, but he had no idea that the terms and conditions and what was in it for the player was absolutely horrible by industry standards. And so even though it was legally okay, he didn't have that business knowledge to know that it was a crummy deal. Bottom line.
For sure.
As a matter of fact, it was one of the worst deals I'd ever seen. And I've looked at a lot of contracts in my days. And so it put a mental strain on the players, right? Because after the fact, after the hype wore down and after they were doing well in Challenger League, and this wasn't just we'll do our thing and we won't make it. And all of a sudden, here comes the sweat. So we had that team resign from the org, which, we looked at the labor laws of the state that the contract was signed and found that we were legally justified to leave the contract, as there was no benefit whatsoever other than a singular jersey for the players for multiple years.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got them out of that contract. They made Pro League. They signed with an organization, and now they're tied for the highest paid team in that region, period. And they're loving it, right? And they're loving it. So that was a good thing. But again, I have if I need to be a bully to an org, it's only because they tried to bully my clients in the first place, and I have no problem doing that. We've taken them to court before. We've sued. And, we'll do whatever it takes to, but if we feel like a client of ours, a player, a content creator is legally justified to leave and they don't want to allow that, we'll take the necessary action. Because at the end of the day, if you're a top tier player, I mean, you're an elite athlete, right? And so there's a reason why these big organizations pay for psychologists and sports people that design nutrition to allow the brain to process information faster and better. And so if there's something psychologically bogging you down, like, oh my gosh, I got to go through this and I'm stuck in this contract for years, that will affect your performance greatly. And you won't be able to play at your full potential. So to get into a deal that's not going to bug you, or you can just go and focus on what you do best, which is play this game, and let other people take care of the ancillary stuff, knowing that you're in good hands and that they're the pro league of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of something that psychologically can't be matched if you're in that position as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that point. It's just, you see it really in traditional sports is kind of the best parallel, because that's a model that's so well established. It's
right.
Taking all that stress off their shoulders so they can just go play and be the
Mm-hmm.
best they be, which, I mean, it's proven in studies all over the world that, stress and all of its related components diminish performance in anything, right? It doesn't have to just be competing at a high level in esports or football or basketball. It can be at work, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a judge, doesn't matter. Or that there's just a confounding effect. Kind of one thing that was hidden in there that I want to expand on a little bit. So you mentioned the differences that this one person didn't understand, that because it wasn't related to the esports business. And
Mm-hmm.
like I just said, the traditional sports, right? It's a very relatable model compared to
Absolutely.
esports, right? They're very close, definitely based in very different things, whether a virtual game versus, a physical game. But talk to us about what those differences are and how, you try to overcome these differences in the esports space. Also kind of like what to look out for the esports players that might look at a traditional agent or a traditional kind of contract and be like, oh, this is legally sound, I have no problem with it.
Right.
But for esports, it's totally wrong.
Yeah, so traditional sports and esports are parallel in a lot of ways, except for one primary way. And unfortunately, that is the way that traditional sports makes money. And that's the fact that it's not as varied as esports. So there's not as many games, right? So there's 4 or 5 games total that have been selected out of all the sports in the world to be boosted up and have stadiums and teams and money and big salaries. Me being American, obviously American football is the biggest here. We have the NBA basketball there as well. We've got baseball, we've got hockey, and we've got soccer, right? Major League Soccer. There's some other ones that have, regional, and there's some tier 2 and tier 3 options for smaller towns and cities. But when you have that regional thing, which is what we saw Blizzard Activision do, is try to make it a regional thing, because even if you're not intimately familiar with the game, you can have that emotion, that attachment to your team because of where you live. And that's why, I'm in Texas. I got this side of the street, they're Dallas Cowboys fans. This side of the street, they're Houston Texans fans. And I'm that sad Dolphins fan in the corner. All right. But, regional is a big deal, because that puts butts in seats. Right? That's ticket sales. That is a tremendous moneymaker for the teams as individuals. And the league's overarching structure doesn't take as much of that. Of course, the second part of it is the broadcasting rights. And, with traditional media, that broadcast right is huge, but you have to understand that the public's been indoctrinated to these sports for, in some cases, over 100 years. Right? Baseball, for example, American football has been going for a long time. And so the public's been educated, and that's kind of been the thing. So they start in high school, right? Look at these high school sports arenas in Texas. They're bigger than some of the northern college arenas that I've been in, right? And so getting indoctrinated as this is the sport. This is the one that everybody goes to. That's a thing. In the video game industry, there's a new game coming out every couple of months, right? Big game, this is going to be the next whatever. And so the constant flow of new games, and then the existing games, the constant changing of the meta, makes it for the public has a lot more difficulty keeping up with it. And of course, you typically your typical fan will I guess most of all will be interested in the game that they're watching as well. And so when a game gets frustrating, or the new game comes out that's enticing, that draws them away, that you've lost a customer effectively, because they've went off to explore this game, and maybe they want to watch the pro league for that game. So the lack of a good regional structure, although, Blizzard Overwatch, I think, has the right idea to try and do something. Now, backing up a step, we talked about that you have, you deal with college esports a lot. And that's a cool thing because college is inherently has a built-in fan base, right? I've been to college, of course. So, a lot of people. When you're at college, I mean, you're part of that fight, right? When I was at Baylor, it was sick 'em Bears, right? Bears for life. And so you've already got that audience kind of built in. If you can educate them, right? If you could pick universally a game or two, probably some of the tried and true games like your League of Legends and something like a Counter-Strike. So that way you get your MOBA fans, you got your people that are interested in first-person shooters, or maybe even, Valorant or whatever. And start selling tickets and stuff like that. I mean, that could really press up the public education portion of the esports industry. So people who never even play video games or never play that game could become a fan of that game and understand it to a level enough where it's entertaining to watch. I think that would be a big step in the right direction for esports. Unfortunately, right now, we're kind of at a point, and I can't remember who said this. It was the CEO of one of the organizations that I was speaking with recently, who hit the nail on the head. Was right now the only people in esports that make money are lawyers. So, which couldn't be, it couldn't be more true. Which is unfortunate. So thankfully, I don't have to solve the problem of monetization in esports, but I can tell you I understand the difficulty of it. And I think it's going to be a while before, these athletes and stuff are going to be making the kind of money that we see traditional athletes make. That being said, I don't want that to deter your dream. If you're good at a game, if you're entertaining, if you do something that nobody else does, the cost to entry to get started and give it a shot is almost nothing these days. And maybe get your hands on a good computer or something and take a shot at it. And if you do something that's different, do something that people respond to, and this, from a content creator or as a player, you're gonna have that success in no time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting dilemma, right? And it's always trying to figure out like where that curve is of where that monetization is going to hit. Because that is the truth. It's, a lot of people don't realize like a lot of esports orgs, the big ones, don't make a profit internally, right? They have their sponsors, they have their ad deals, they have their media rights. And even then, media rights in esports I feel like they're a lot cheaper because a lot of players watch Twitch for free, right? Like you don't pay for cable TV to watch sports, right? You don't pay for NFL game day, right? Sunday ticket, whatever station you're watching it on you pay $100 for all these games. You just turn on Twitch, and most of the time those massive pro leagues like Pro League and Siege or LCS are free, right? You just twitch.tv/LCS/Rainbow Six, and boom, you're there, you're watching. So it's going to be very interesting to see where that curve hits. Hopefully sooner than later, because I think that obviously trickles down to the players and even further into the youth. So absolutely incredible there. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Absolutely fantastic discussion on a kind of a different take, more unusual take that's catching on, but it needs to catch on. It's really helping these players make sure they're not exploited and making sure that they're getting their value that they're providing to the org and they're providing to all of those business people. So absolutely love to see that. Real quick, one last question, kind of for the youth. The high schoolers and some of the college kids that are playing esports that might be looking to go pro or try out in the amateur leagues. What would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give to help them, be weary of signing some of these contracts to make sure they're not exploited, to make sure that, they are getting a good deal for themselves?
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, especially as the younger they are, is, the parent will say, okay, I'll read it. And when the parent signs off on that, mom and dad could do no wrong. And unfortunately, most often the parent doesn't know anything about the business of esports. And I'm not saying that the parent doesn't know anything. Okay. They're probably experts in things that I could only dream of. But at the business of esports, again, what we heard with that earlier example of the attorney who's been practicing law for decades, it says, oh, this is legally sound. And then when I took a look at it, it ended up being one of the worst contracts I'd ever seen. When you're getting advice on a contract, even if it's just a question or two, ask somebody who knows the business of esports. Okay. They're very easy to find. For example, there's a couple of attorneys with DMs open that are known for this sort of thing. Ryan Morrison and Ryan Fairchild. Both of them are lawyers that I've been in contact with multiple times and have helped me answering questions, and they'll be happy to do consultations for you. So maybe we could put a link with maybe their Twitter information or something like that, because they're good resources. You could get in touch with me. There's several other different agencies as well that you can reach out to. But just knowing that the person who says you're okay to sign, this is fine, is not on the other side of the table from you, so not coming from the organization, and B, that they know the business of esports specifically. Okay. Your dad owns a construction company. That's great. He doesn't know squat about esports, I guarantee you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just make sure that they know that business in particular, because it's different than any other business out there. That's probably the best way. And then do independent research. And for the love of God, please, because you don't understand how often this happens, read the contract.
That would be a great start, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Read the thing that you're about to sign.
Yes.
That becomes legally
in its entirety.
Exactly. All the way through. So many people, I always go back to the terms of service, right? Which is kind of like the new culture in the digital age. If you're like, oh, terms of service, contract, agree, sign a lease.
Yes.
Whatever, I'll just sign. Read it all the way through, because you never know what that one sentence might throw a whole loop that creates just so many issues and consequences down the line. Once again, thank you, Chris, aka TyTangles, for taking the time to come on and really explain this whole newer concept. Well, newer for esports, right? Hopefully it catches on to be completely mainstream and really helps a lot of these players. Absolutely. Real quick, go ahead, plug yourself, plug OEA, and tell us where we can find out more if any of the viewers want to reach out or just learn a little bit more about you and OEA.
Sure, absolutely. We have a website, oea.gg, and kind of goes over basically the services we provide without boring the heck out of you. But mostly I lurk in the background working on contracts and meetings and stuff like that. So I'm not exciting. I am on social media at TyTangles on Twitter. And that's about it. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. It was a great time. I always love bringing these newer knowledges or, some unforeseen areas or corners of the esports industry and market to really, like I said, to grow the industry, because that's the common goal, is really bringing esports to that forefront where it's mainstream, where, like you said, you grow up and you watch League of Legends with your dad when you're 4 years old or whatever. That's would be something incredible to see. Hopefully it happens sooner than later. So once again, thank you for taking the time. To all our viewers, thanks for sticking around the whole time. Stay healthy, stay happy in the current COVID-19 pandemic. Make sure you take care of yourselves and your loved ones. And ultimately, stay plugged in.